Hello and welcome to this video about the new features of FileMaker Pro 12. My name is Matt Petrowsky. I'm a FileMaker developer and the purveyor of fine FileMaker content over at FileMakerMagazine.com. This is going to be a very quick overview of the new features and how they may impact your development moving forward into your new copy of FileMaker Pro 12. So let's head into the content. First off, here are the icons, the old FileMaker Pro Advanced 11 and the new FileMaker Pro Advanced 12. I'm not currently showing the FileMaker Pro icons. As a developer, I'm mostly interested in the development, but I'm sure you'll be able to find those on the FileMaker.com website. So here is the older starter solution when you had no database open, and that migrates into this. Just a small little change in the look and feel. The next feature that we have is a big one. It is under the File menu, under the Manage submenu, we have containers. So FileMaker is now going to be able to store containers separate outside of the database, which is the optimized way of storing things. Here is the dialog that you get where you're able to specify multiple base directories. It's a simple dialog prompt when you click New or Edit with all of the familiar FileMaker paths. You will also be able to modify how thumbnails are represented. You can either generate and store those permanently or temporarily. You can see currently the selection there is temporary, where permanent would store a much smaller thumbnail version within the container for you to view. Now, along with containers, we have a new validation option, a maximum number of kilobytes. You can see that checked under the Require section. This will also turn into maximum number of characters if specified on a text or number field. Next, we have storage, where we can see that the container will store container data externally, and you can pick one of the base directories that were specified within the dialog when you selected the Manage container. You can see that we have the two options of Secure Storage and Open Storage. Next, we have the Insert menu, and as it relates to containers, FileMaker is now supporting a few more types. You can see that audio and video and the PDF are currently grayed out, and that's because the field, while selected on the layout, is not set to the interactive content. This is all controlled by this dialog right here. Now, the dialog over there on the left was the older FileMaker 11 menu, and then on the newer menu we have the audio, video, and the PDF. But it's under the Data tab of the inspector towards the very bottom when you're actually formatting the field with the field selected on layout, where you can specify interactive content with the checkbox of Start Playback Automatically, applying to MP3, video, etc. Next, we have the complementary Insert File Script steps. Over there in the left of this particular script, you can see that we've got the Insert Audio Video, Insert PDF, and the Insert File gains a couple of new settings. You can see that when you click to specify, we have a new dialog that allows us to filter, plus a number of other options, such as the display down there with the icon with file name, or the content of file when possible, or compression to never compress, let the user choose, or compress when possible. And beyond this, when you click the new or the edit in terms of adding filters, what you're going to be able to choose from are a preset number of selections, or as always, we have our familiar specify calculation. So if you only want GIFs to go into that container field, or you only want a certain type of video file, you can of course specify that with a calculation. Now, when it comes to the containers, we of course need functions in order to work with those. And here we have the getHeight function and the getWidth function, dealing with getting the height and width of the actual object directly from within the container. Now, of course, you were able to grab those before. They were just simply stored as a return delimited value list, but only when the image was stored as a reference, not directly within the container. We also have the verify container to verify whether or not that data is stored externally. And then we also have the get thumbnail, which allows us to get the thumbnail with all the parameters of field, width, and height. Now when it comes to debugging, we have one additional little feature. You can see it's that additional button with the dashed line surrounding it. That is a button that allows us to disable or enable script triggers while we are debugging with FileMaker Pro Advanced. When it comes to script triggers, we have a new script trigger called onTabSwitch. The onTabSwitch is something that will only be available when you select tab panes, and there are two functions that they go along with this, and you need to use those within your script. The first one is getTriggerCurrentTab panel. That's basically where you're coming from at the point in time that you click the onTabSwitch trigger. And then we have the getTriggerTarget tab panel. Now what's returned from these is the index, the number of the tab in order in which they are displayed, from the left to the right, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Also, the object name is returned. This is the object name if you have supplied one within the inspector, not the actual name of the tab itself. Next, we have a new feature of Keep Records Sorted, something that will default to on, I believe. That will be in the sort dialog when you're just sorting within the database, also within the script step within Manage Scripts. Next, we have a new script step called Sort Records by Field step. Now when you click the Specify Target field, you're just going to get a standard Specify field. So we'll see a number of tips and tricks come out about this, but basically this is a shortened version of using the more extensive sort script step. And of course, under the specify, we have ascending, descending, and by value list, things that we are familiar with in the standard sort dialog box. Next, we have window script triggers. These are additions that have been added as a new section of script triggers under the file options. You can see with the red dashed line that we are in the file options. Now the on first window open and on last window close were two script triggers that did previously exist. They were within the file options, but this is where you access them now. The two new functions are the on window open and on window close, which will apply to any given window that is either opened or closed. Next, we have window styles. Window styles gives us one more control over how windows behave. At the bottom of the new window option, or the new window script step, you're going to see that we have the window styles with the specify advanced style. When you specify that, you're going to get three options: a document window, a floating document window, which will float above all other windows, and then a dialog window, something that is modal, meaning you will not be able to access any other windows until that modal dialog window is dismissed. And currently for the document window, you can see the checkboxes below of close, minimize, maximize, zoom control area, and resize. All of those different checkboxes become either available or unavailable depending on what you select, either floating document or a dialog window. Next, we have functions that are going to support that, and that is the getWindowStyle function. And then we're going to move on to custom menus. This is the old dialog and how things looked. We see that we had the include on platform, Windows and Macintosh. This has been extended to give you much more control, where we now have access to FileMaker's calculation engine. Currently, this is saying install always with a value of 1 or true. That means this menu will always exist. Now we have a much greater degree of control of when menus actually show up. Very advantageous. The next new feature we have is a script step of find matching. This is the same thing that we had as an implementation in FileMaker 11 as a contextual menu, where if you had access to the field, you were able to right-click on within that field and be able to find all matching records. This is now extended into managing scripts and being able to specify that. We have the options of replace, constrain, and extend. And don't be confused, replace does not, in this situation, have anything to do with the replace functionality. This simply means replace the found set with what we have in terms of the matching record. Next, we have one of the most powerful features in all of FileMaker 12. Do not underestimate the execute SQL function. Yes, it is implemented as a function. What this means is a lot of techniques are going to come out as a result of this one feature. In fact, if you don't already know, it's possible now with the execute SQL to theoretically even create a FileMaker database with no interconnected table occurrences. Although not suggested because you want to take advantage of FileMaker's power, but this will reduce the number of a lot of table occurrences within our graph and supply a lot of new functionality. Next, we have the UUID function. And dare I say, this pretty much replaces the serial number. In fact, I would suggest that if you are going to develop a database with FileMaker 12 going forward, this is what your auto enter is going to look like for your ID field. You're going to put a calculated value. It's simply going to use the function we see right there, get UUID. We specify the do not replace, and we prohibit modification. The reason for this is moving forward in this mobile world, when we have disconnected data sets and we're doing a lot of syncing, you want to use UUID. You do not want to use that serial number. The serial number will more or less become a visual representation with its ability to make a more human readable value for reference of objects such as invoices, customers, etc. But you will use those in conjunction with the UUID function. Now the big talk of the town is layout mode, completely overhauled with new themes. You can see on screen right there that we have guides, and those can be pulled out from either of the two rulers. Beyond that, we have full opacity settings and full gradient support within the new layout mode. You can see that the standard color picker is coming up, and we have the opacity control, we have the control over all of the different color settings, which we did have control over before, but the opacity and the gradients are the two big features. Now, when it comes to designing, you can see that there's a little widget right there which allows us to access stencils. These are simply just guides that provide us with the dimensions of the popular devices that we're going to be designing for within FileMaker Pro. At the very bottom, you can see that we have one custom size that we can set along with other defaults provided based on current devices. The next big feature is going to be the support for FileMaker's grids. These grids are able to be set however you desire. They're within the inspector, and you can see right there that we have the major grid spacing and the minor grid spacing. The one thing that you need to also note is you can see just to the right of the major grid spacing, we've gone from px, or from pixels, to point values. And the one thing you probably should keep in mind is that 72 points is pretty much the same as our screen resolution of 72 dpi. But of course, if you've worked on Windows, then you know that 96 dpi is also a setting that you can use, where things become device independent. So remember that you can use the snap to grid and show to grid when you're designing, and you're going to be able to get much cleaner designs within layout mode. Another major feature, which might seem hidden originally, is fixed with layouts. When you specify the rightmost edge of your particular layout, you need to know that you can have things beyond that rightmost edge, and those objects will still be available within the layout that you're designing, but they will not display. They will essentially be hidden components of your layout. So you can have a bunch of things off to the side. Next, we have under layout mode in the insert menu, while you're in layout view, you actually can insert pretty much every one of the get functions. Not all of them, but most all of them. That's going to be found using the other symbol, which is now just below all of the presets that we had before of date, time, user, page, and record. This is really advantageous because it will definitely cut down on the number of calculated values, unstored calculated values within our defined fields area. It allows us to do things such as logged in as account name, and it will say who the user is logged in as. The next big feature is, of course, the change theme. This is found within layout mode under the layouts menu, and the change theme will bring up a dialog such as this, where all of these themes are currently available. Now, the one thing you need to note in this particular dialog, and I'm just going to throw this out as an aside because I won't be showing you in this video, it is possible, although it will not be promoted within FileMaker 12, it is possible and has been set up so that custom areas and custom themes can be created. While you may not hear the word CSS, what FileMaker is doing behind the scenes, when you apply a theme to an individual layout, that theme actually translates or interprets CSS, or at least this is my understanding of it, and then embeds that within the file. However, I don't believe that it's actually rendering real time within layout mode the actual CSS because it is no longer referenced after you've imported it into a particular layout, or excuse me, into a particular file. Now, when it comes to objects, as we already talked about, we have gradient support, but when you have an object selected, the appearance area of the inspector now provides us with multiple states as well as the features that we have for fill. Now, the multiple states are in focus, hover, and pressed. The theme will originally define these, but you also have control over these. Now, the only thing that really applies to the hover is when an object is defined as a button. I believe the same with pressed as well. So really the normal state and the in focus are the two that you're going to modify the most. The hover and the pressed will apply to buttons, actual objects that you can make changes to. Now, of course, you can see that you can fill that with a solid color, but you can also specify your own custom gradients with angles, whether it's a circle gradient or a linear gradient. It's completely up to you. You can also see that the line has additional settings, and the corner radius is also possible on all of your objects, or the objects that do support those features. Along with gradients, we have the ability to inject images, and while I don't currently have an image within that container in this screenshot, you can see below the image box area that we have the tile option. There is also a slice option which will allow a pattern to repeat. This allows you to have very thinly sliced graphics and repeat those, keeping the overhead of the layout that you design very, very low. Next, under the layout mode layout setup, we're going to have one little option that says delineate fields on current record only. And this really only applies to views that are in list view, because if you're on a given record within list view or table view, you don't necessarily want the on focus or all of the different objects to show on all of the different records, just on the current record that you're on. And this checkbox really doesn't need to be on form view, but if it is, it probably won't hurt things. Now, when it comes to indicating things on layout, along with all of those that you're familiar with, we have the indication of when particular layouts have script triggers on those layouts. That's the little star that you see right there. There's also a little indicator that it's at the bottom of a particular layout. We also have indicators that come in the form of the show menu, where you can show buttons, and what you get is a little indicator just like you have with the quick find and the tooltips and other things that just hangs off to the lower bottom right edge. Now, when it comes to layout mode extras, here are a few things. Multiple change undo. That means when you're in layout mode and designing your layout, for however many things you do before you exit layout mode, you can continue to hit that Command or Control Z and it will simply go back that many times. It also applies when you are in browse mode within text fields, but as soon as you exit or commit, all of that history is then lost. Also, containers take children, and as you can read, in other words, drag a portal and the fields go too. All of the objects now have all of their internal objects completely contained, just like with tab panels. And also, one little fix that they made with tab panels is that when you drag it, if you drag it onto another object, it doesn't necessarily suck up or adopt a particular child object that's outside of that tab panel. It's all self-contained. Now here, I had to throw this in, are a few of the layout mode bummers. Lasso selections. The pass over and the encircle selections now don't work. Where formerly you were able to hold down the command key, now it's pretty much anything you pass over, that's what's going to be selected. So we now have to make shift-click selections for multiple objects. And passing over will select all objects underneath. Also, one of the things that you may not get from any of the FileMaker marketing materials, themes cannot be reapplied. Themes, once they are applied to a file, if you go in and decide to make custom changes to the theme underneath, they cannot be modified then reapplied. And also, themes cannot be applied in bulk to all layouts. You apply an individual theme to a given layout. So as a developer, what you're going to do is, whether you choose one of the default themes or decide to go in and make your own, you're going to apply those pretty much once and create a form view, create a list view, and then duplicate layouts within your solution from that point forward. Making change from a theme standpoint, at least in FileMaker 12, is not going to be a highly suggested activity. We're going to make attempts to design our themes so that they stay flexible and we can make changes just like we did in FileMaker 11. So there's a few new functions with regards to mobile. Those come in the form of location, something that you can access on a mobile device such as the iPad or iPhone. And supporting that is location values. Another mobile function is get connection state. While it's not specifically mobile related, it will work with a desktop database. It's sort of where it pretty much fits. Then we have a device function, which again works more or less with the iOS devices, but can also be used on the desktop as well, so that you know exactly which copy of FileMaker on which computer is being used, and you can set permission settings, all kinds of different things using the get persistent ID. Now when it comes to plugins, we have get installed FM plugins as a function, and in order to back that up, we have a script step that says install plugin file, and this is going to come from a container. What this more or less means is that the auto update method of deploying plugins is pretty much going away, because this is the new way to install plugins within FileMaker Pro. Now the charting feature, while it didn't change a whole lot, its implementation and how you interact did. You can see right here that we have the new charting overhaul, which simply put everything into one dialog with the hierarchical set on the side where we have chart, styles, and data source. So you're just simply going to select each of those areas, but everything that you're going to specify is now within this one dialog. And down there at the very bottom, sort of towards the center where you see the pause button, you have the use actual data, which can be set to change to use sample data. Now, one that can't be overlooked, which is very advantageous, is a script step, insert from URL. What this means is that you're able to, using a URL, which can be anything from a local URL to a remote URL, can pull content into a field. This can be a text field or a container field. Pull in an image if you want. Pull in the source for an HTML link, and then parse it and do whatever you want. Specify the options, and you can pull it in from a URL. And finally, we have some changes to the Show Custom dialog. There was an issue where if the user did not click the cancel button, but yet there was a process that the dialog needed to close out or commit the record, that was not actually happening. So now we have commit data options under each of the buttons, which provides us with the ability to make sure that the data is being submitted back to a remotely hosted file. So that is our quick overview. There are a few other little features, some that deal with accessibility and a few other little tweaks in places, but with regards to the major features, that's pretty much what you're going to find in FileMaker 12. Now, while it may seem pretty simple with only 39 slides here, what you need to know is that the combination of all of these features are really going to make your database shine. We're talking about the layout mode, execute SQL, and some of the other features that are really going to make your FileMaker solution soar. So if you'd like more information about working with FileMaker 12, visit the website www.filemakermagazine.com. I've got ongoing videos covering techniques and valuable know-how. This is Matt Petrowsky bringing you all of the new features for FileMaker Pro 12. Much luck with your FileMaker development, and until next time, happy FileMaking.